Indianapolis, January 2024. Newberry Road, one of many streets in the American Midwest where life unfolds in its usual rhythm. The Timber Point Apartments complex seemed an island of predictability and relative calm. Standard apartment buildings, parking lots, playgrounds in the distance. In the evenings, warm light would glow in the windows, creating an illusion of coziness and safety. But behind one of those doors, in apartment 6300, that illusion shattered against a monstrous reality. It was here, within walls that should have been a fortress, that the short story of 2-year-old Skylar Gardner unfolded and tragically ended. Her death was the senseless yet predictable outcome of months of unimaginable neglect, the culmination of a story where maternal love had been replaced by selfishness and indifference. On the evening of January 25th, the usual hum of the apartment complex was broken by sirens. It all started with a 911 call. The voice of 33-year-old Chantel Gardner, Skylar's mother, likely sounded distressed as she reported a terrible discovery to the dispatcher. She had found her youngest daughter motionless, cold to the touch. The cause, she claimed, was a fallen dresser. The story Chantel told sounded like a tragic accident, a sudden blow of fate that could strike any family. But this version was merely a facade, hiding a truth capable of shocking even those who had seen much human suffering in the line of duty. The first responders who crossed the threshold of apartment 6300, paramedics and police officers, encountered a scene impossible to forget. This wasn't just a neglected dwelling. It was a place where the very concept of home had been obliterated. The choking stench of rotting garbage, excrement, and filth hit them immediately. Piles of waste covered the floor, littered with sharp kitchen knives, used syringes, cigarette butts, a deadly environment for small children. It became obvious that the light dresser Chantel mentioned couldn't have caused the death. It stood partially leaning against a chair, a flimsy structure of fabric and metal. Death hadn't come to Skylar from its fall. The little girl's physical state spoke for itself. Her body was cold, and signs of rigor mortis indicated she had been dead for many hours, long before her mother called 911. Chantel's initial story collapsed like a house of cards, exposing an abyss of parental negligence. Skylar Gardner. What was she like? The few surviving fragments of information paint a picture of a quiet, perhaps slightly withdrawn girl with large, clear eyes that should have seen a world full of color and wonder, not filth and darkness. She loved the color pink, the color of a carefree childhood she never had. Her only friend and solace was a small plush bunny she never let go of, as if clinging to the last island of warmth and safety in her cold world. Her world was unthinkable without her 4-year-old brother. They weren't just brother and sister, they were a survival team, two little souls lost in a nightmare created by their own mother. They shared everything: hunger, cold, fear. They played together amidst the garbage, slept together on the freezing floor, huddled close for warmth they desperately lacked. Their silent mutual support was the only constant in their unstable and frightening lives. This hell hadn't lasted just one day. The investigation established that for at least 3 months since October 2023, the children had lived in conditions that couldn't simply be called bad. Chantel Gardner, their mother, had retreated deeper into her own reality, built on ambitions, parties, and a relationship with her boyfriend, 30-year-old Brian Thomas. Her absences grew longer, first hours, then nights, then several days at a time. The children were left alone, locked within 4 walls that had become their prison. The conditions of their existence were beyond comprehension. In winter, the apartment wasn't heated, turning it into an icy trap where the temperature hovered around 45 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit, 7 to 10 Celsius. Normal food was out of the question. Their mother, if she appeared at all, did so only for a moment, to leave a bag of leftovers from the nearest fast food joint. Cold burgers, stuck-together nuggets, limp wings, chips, all washed down with sugary sports drinks. Clean water was scarce. The older boy, showing resourcefulness born of desperation, had learned to climb onto the kitchen counter to reach the faucet and quench his and his sister's thirst. They slept on the filthy floor amidst the waste. Their diapers were changed so rarely that the skin underneath had become a continuous painful sore. Over time, the little ones even stopped crying when they soiled themselves. Bitter childhood experience had taught them. Tears were useless. No one would come. No one would help. Surrounding them weren't bright, stimulating toys, but syringes, cigarette butts, sharp fragments. A constant threat. Yet even in this darkness, sprouts of childhood resilience emerged. They found reasons to smile, for quiet laughter, their innocence desperately clinging to life despite the suffocating indifference of the adult world. Chantel's rare visits brought the children no joy. She smelled of cigarettes and alcohol. Later, she would admit to investigators that she grimaced in disgust at the sight of her soiled children. She would mechanically give them food and hurry back out, to her boyfriend, to her friends, to her real life. Timid requests, "Mommy, play, mommy, stay," were met with irritated dismissal. The children were fading before her eyes. They lagged in development, barely gained weight, suffered from constant stomach pain, coughs, fevers. But their physical and emotional suffering seemed not to concern their mother at all. Her focus was directed outward, on creating an illusion of success. The world of social media knew a different Chantel Gardner. Under the pseudonym Chantel BWI, or Boyer, both names appeared in different sources, she cultivated the image of a strong, independent, go-getter woman. Her YouTube channel and Facebook pages were showcases for her ambitions. There, she was an aspiring rap star, performing her tracks with confidence and style. She presented herself to her followers as well-groomed, fashionably dressed, in clean, bright interiors, a stark contrast to the exhausted, perhaps indifferent woman who occasionally appeared at the threshold of apartment 6300. She posted selfies from parties, shared her thoughts on life, music, success. She bragged about new purchases, talked about her achievements, even about becoming a women's basketball coach. She created the image of an active, purposeful person, perhaps even inspiring others. In this carefully constructed online reality, there was no room for dirty diapers, children's cries, hunger, or cold. Her children, Skylar and her brother, seemed not to exist in this glittering world. Not a single photo, not a single tender word, not a single mention of their small joys or sorrows. This dissonance between the glossy picture and the squalid reality was deafening. How could a woman so concerned with her public image neglect her closest and most vulnerable dependents so monstrously? In retrospect, one of her posts, published shortly before the January tragedy, took on a particularly sinister tone. "I don't trust anyone except my children," Chantel wrote, though things aren't so straightforward with the second one. The second child was Skylar. What did this strange, ambiguous phrase mean? Was it a fleeting thought, poor wording? Or was it a dark, subconscious hint at her true feelings toward her little daughter? Irritation, resentment, seeing Skylar as a burden? In light of subsequent events, these words sounded like a terrible omen, as if a crack in her mask had momentarily revealed the cold void within. The illusion finally shattered on the evening of January 25th, 2024. While Chantel was building her virtual life, her daughter's real life came to a tragic end. The evidence gathered at the scene and during the subsequent examination left no stone unturned of her initial story about an accident. The medical examiners presented findings that chilled the blood. Skylar's small body wasn't just lifeless, it bore multiple signs of prolonged suffering. Bruises of various sizes and shapes, bite marks, later confirmed to be human. Trauma to her lip. All pointed to possible physical abuse or, at the very least, a complete lack of care and protection in a dangerous environment. Signs of frostbite on her tiny hands and feet were irrefutable proof that the child had spent her final hours, possibly days, in the piercing cold of the unheated apartment. The autopsy revealed even more horrific details. Hair, paint chips, and other inedible items were found in the girl's stomach. Desperate, instinctive attempts to appease agonizing hunger with anything she could find in that filthy apartment. Her body was severely emaciated and dehydrated. Ultimately, the cold itself was the direct cause of death. Hypothermia, a dry medical term concealing the agonizing death of a small child freezing alone, just meters away from unsuspecting neighbors. Her 4-year-old brother survived only by a miracle. When he was taken to Riley Children's Hospital, doctors were shocked by his condition. Physically, he suffered from severe constipation, a consequence of malnutrition and dehydration, and extreme emaciation. But the emotional wounds were even more terrifying. The boy was frightened, weak, flinching at any touch or sound. He showed all the signs of severe food trauma, panicking that his food would be taken away, eating ravenously in huge bites, as if trying to stock up, as if unable to believe that food would now be consistently available. Doctors understood. The boy was on the brink, and any delay in help could have cost him his life. His rescue became the only bright spot in this grim story, but the scars left by the nightmare he endured will stay with him for life. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Chantel Gardner began to talk. Her initial statements of shock and ignorance gave way to confused, contradictory accounts. She tried to evade responsibility, blaming circumstances, fatigue, a difficult life. But under pressure from investigators, the mask began to slip, revealing cold indifference. She confessed that the unbearable stench in the apartment kept her away, so she preferred spending time at her boyfriend's. Confessed she bathed the children sporadically, once a week or two, just to wash off the accumulated dirt and excrement. Confessed she saw her daughter's health problems, saw her suffering from dirty diapers, but did nothing to help. She confirmed she left her 2-year-old daughter and 4-year-old son alone every night, condemning them to cold, hunger, fear, and complete isolation, while she sought comfort and entertainment elsewhere. Her confessions, devoid of emotion and remorse, sounded like a report on someone else's life, as if she were talking not about her own children, but about some inconvenient objects interfering with her life. Her boyfriend, Brian Thomas, inevitably came under investigation. What was his role? Did he know what was happening in apartment 6300? Could he have intervened? Initially, the 30-year-old man tried to lie, claiming he knew nothing, that he thought the children were with relatives when Chantel stayed over. He tried to protect his girlfriend, but a check of his phone and further questioning forced him to admit the truth. Yes, Chantel spent most of the week at his place. Yes, he knew the children were often left alone. He had last seen them a month before the tragedy. Although there was no direct evidence of his involvement in abuse or neglect, his lies to investigators and passive knowledge of the situation led to charges of aiding a criminal. He didn't pull the trigger, but he stood by and didn't try to stop the shooter. The tragedy of Skylar Gardner is not just a story of one mother's criminal negligence and her partner's possible complicity. It's also a story of deep, pervasive indifference from those around them. The investigation uncovered numerous missed opportunities, many alarm bells that no one properly heeded. The children's biological father, living in another state and disabled, was denied the ability to communicate with them. His calls and messages went unanswered. Chantel isolated the children not only from herself, but also from others who might have noticed something was wrong. Other relatives who managed to see the little ones occasionally noticed the smell of urine, their unkempt appearance, but their concerns didn't translate into decisive action. Neighbors in the Timber Point Apartments complex couldn't have missed the horrific odor seeping from apartment 6300 into the common hallway. Some heard children crying at night. But the fear of seeming intrusive, the reluctance to get involved in other people's business, perhaps simply fatigue and absorption in their own problems, all led to inaction. We thought about complaining to the manager, but never got around to it. This phrase became a bitter leitmotif in witness testimonies. Even the property management company, after receiving complaints about the smell, limited itself to formal reminder letters about maintaining cleanliness, without bothering to check what was actually happening behind the apartment door. This collective blindness, this silent acceptance of the abnormal situation, created a vacuum around Skylar and her brother, in which their suffering remained invisible and unheard. One call to Child Protective Services could have initiated a support mechanism, could have pulled the children out of that hell, could have saved Skylar's life. But the call never came. The wall of indifference proved stronger than the thin walls of the apartment building. When the details of the case became public knowledge, the reaction was swift and unequivocal. People were overcome with shock, anger, and disbelief. How could something like this happen in modern society? How could a mother do this to her children? Particular outrage was fueled by the contrast between the children's horrific living conditions and Chantel's active, outwardly successful life on social media. Her posts about parties, music, sports achievements against the backdrop of her children's suffering seemed sacrilegious. People left angry comments on her pages, demanding the harshest punishment. The Marion County Prosecutor's Office responded to the public outcry and the weight of the evidence by filing the most serious possible charges against Chantel Gardner, including murder. The prosecution's stance was firm. This was not simply negligence through carelessness, but the knowing creation of conditions incompatible with life, an awareness of the high probability of a fatal outcome if her actions continued. The court set a date for a jury trial, which would decide Chantel's fate in this complex and emotionally charged case. She faced life imprisonment. Brian Thomas was also charged, although less severely. Lawyers commenting on the case noted that the key issue for the jury would be determining the degree of Chantel's awareness. Did she know her actions were highly likely to result in death? Proving this knowing state of mind is a complex legal challenge, but the outcome would determine the classification of the crime and the severity of the sentence. The story of Skylar Gardner left a deep wound in the heart of Indianapolis and resonated painfully across the country. It is the tragedy of one child, one family, but it became a symbol of broader problems: the erosion of family values, the dangers of virtual reality substituting for real life, failures in the social protection system, and perhaps most frighteningly, an epidemic of indifference. The little girl who loved pink and her plush bunny will never see the sun again, never hug her brother, never know what real care and love feel like. Her short life, filled with fear, cold, and hunger, ended too soon and too cruelly. Her memory must be more than a cause for sorrow. It must be an eternal reminder that we bear responsibility for one another, especially for the most defenseless among us. Skylar's tragedy is a call to be more attentive to those living beside us, to listen not only to the sounds through the wall, but also to the voice of our own conscience, not to be afraid of seeming overly vigilant when a child's well-being is at stake. Sometimes one phone call, one word spoken out of concern, one simple action can break the circle of silence and save a life. Let the story of Skylar Gardner teach us this bitter but necessary lesson.